What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So the other day I did a review of my FOA coilovers and kind of all the reasons why I'm not going to be running them on my Jeep. But after I posted that video, and I'll link that up above, so if you want to check it out. But after I posted that video, I had a few of you guys hit me up on my Instagram asking if, when I choose whatever coilovers I'm going to go with, if I would do a side-by-side comparison, kind of going through the differences between the two. So the Fox coilovers I chose to go with showed up yesterday. I'm going to get them out of the box. We're going to get them on the bench, take a look. All right, guys, so we have both of them out. They're both 14-inch travel. They're both 2.0 with remote reservoir. So there's subtle differences as far as the body, the lengths, and compressed and extended. It's almost a 1-inch difference. Fox a tiny bit longer, so their body is a little bit longer than the FOA, and that was like the first thing that I had noticed. Fox comes in at 21.1 on full compression, whereas FOA comes in at 20.3 under full compression. So not too much of a difference, but a little bit. The first thing that jumped out at me as a big difference is the threading and machining and the finish, just the quality difference. So the FOA is not, it's not machined. The threads are cut really bad. They're really rough. They're really sharp. They're just rough and jagged feeling, and that has its own concerns, which I could get into in a minute. But the Fox are just very well done. They're very consistent, very smooth. They're not sharp at all. They're very polished. So like overall, the body is just machined much better. Now the next big difference is the jam nut style on Fox versus the clamping ring style on FOA. I'm not a fan of these clamping style nuts. The reason is when you tighten these, you have to be really careful. These little fine thread machine screws, they can strip out so easy. And the last thing you want is this thing being able to move around on its own. If it gets high enough and you get coil bind, you could shatter your slider. So that's something I don't like. You could also have issues if the upper one strips out or, whatever, or loosens up, you could lose preload. So I don't like that design. It might work for a little while. I know that over time that's gonna strip out for sure. That you're always eventually gonna have issues with those. It's just something that you always have to be super careful with, and I just don't like it. The jam nut style is pretty simple, like you just tighten them in opposite directions and they'll lock down and you don't have to worry about them no more. So it's just a better concept to me. Now getting into one of the other concerns with the threads being so rough and rugged and sharp feeling is your slider. It's a wear and tear item, so as it goes up and down those threads, it's gonna wear. Now this thing, I also mentioned the other video how lightweight and like cheap and chintzy feeling this thing is, and you compare it to the Fox. The Fox one's a little bit heavier. You could definitely feel it's a lot more dense. And then on top of that, the seating surface for the springs is actually larger. So like overall, the quality on the Fox one's much more durable and better. Now, the next big thing that I had pointed out in the other video was the hydraulic line that they use for the remote reservoir. It's just basic hydraulic line, which is fine. I think it would hold up actually pretty well. I don't really see any issues with the fact that, it's just standard hydraulic line. The only concern I would have with it is maybe the off chance of something, getting in there and nicking it. But I I drove tractors when I was younger and everything else. I mean, these things, they're pretty strong. You know, they are cheap to replace, so it's not a big deal. But, you know, your braided line is going to be a lot stronger. It's going to be a lot more resilient to something getting in there and jabbing at it or cutting it. So I personally would prefer to have the braided line than to have the regular rubber. And then one thing that I did like, though, with the FOA is that it uses a 90-degree fitting. Fox has it as an upgrade. King does the same thing where it's an upgrade. For me, it's not a real big concern because I have a lot of, you know, wiggle room for where I can mount this, and I don't have to worry about having the 90. I'll be fine without it. But if it's something that you got to worry about, you know, like you need the 90-degree fitting, you know, that's something that you want to pay attention to. Fox is not going to come with one. It's something you have to upgrade to. Now, getting into the next thing, it kind of brings us back to the machining side. On the FOA rod ends, they're very loose, and I talked about that in the other video. They are rebuildable, so that's, you know, most all of them are, and that's a plus. You know, like the idea that they're rebuildable is really good. The problem is that the rod ends are very inconsistent. Like this one fits in there pretty decent, but then the other end, you know, it's just rattling around in there. And that's the actual rod end itself. So the spherical bearing that goes in it is just sitting inside there. The C-clip is not, the groove for it's not cut very tight to that bearing. But on top of that, the bearing itself, I was looking at it, and it moves like very easily by hand. And that just means that it has looser tolerances, and it's just more prone to wear out and fatigue over time a lot quicker than how the Fox ones are. I mean, the Fox ones sitting there, they're very tight tolerances. I can't move them by hand, and they're fit in the rod ends very well. So the quality on that is much, much better. Now, getting into the actual reservoirs, you know, we're looking from the outside in. I don't know what's on the inside of them. You know, I'm not about to take them apart to look at the differences there, but the external differences, like we know the Fox ones by looking at it are larger. They're probably about an 1/8 to a 1/4 inch diameter bigger, and about a 1/4 inch longer. And the Fox one's not leaking. So that's really it as far as that goes. Now, getting into the next thing, there's a very big difference in the bottom spring plates that they chose to use on FOA. They did like this groove style that goes over the rod and goes down. So it goes over the shaft, it goes down onto the rod end, and it sits on this groove, and it uses your spring pressure to keep that in place so it can't come off. The reason I don't like that at all is, like, with rock crawlers, especially like I'm building the YJ, it's a very lightweight rig. So, like, you know, you think your CJs, your TJs, your YJs that are very lightweight rigs, you're going to be running really light spring rates. And yes, you're going to have a little bit of preload, but you're not going to have a ton of preload. So if you're, you know, articulated up on a rock, you got one tire hanging, and you like maybe bounce it off a rock just right, just enough that maybe you get a little bit of you know, chatter in your springs, there's the very small chance that this thing could walk itself up and off that little groove, and it could just come off. And the likelihood's very small, but I don't like the fact that there's even that chance at all. I just don't think that that's a good design. If you compare that to Fox, that can't come off. It's got a C-clip on the bottom, and it just sits down on that C-clip, and it can't come off without that C-clip being removed. So it's a much superior design. It's gonna, you know, you don't have any worries about your spring coming off or losing parts on the trail. So that was like a big thing for me as far as that goes. So as far as differences, those are like the major, standout ones. And, ultimately there's that coupled with the leaking issues that I had with the FOA ones. They were kind of, leaking from literally everywhere. That was one of the reasons that I chose to go with the Fox coilovers instead. I kind of highlighted a lot of that in the other video, so I don't want to touch on that too much. But hopefully this kind of goes over some of the big things that some of you guys were wondering about as far as the differences between, FOA and other brands. Because this is kind of the standard for most other brands. Like King and Fox are pretty similar in design. So you're going to see a lot of the same things between those two. FOA is just a much different design in a lot of ways. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you'll like, subscribe. I'd love to hear opinions and comments down below. Till next time, guys, on the next video, I'm going to hopefully getting these on there, getting the towers built, and we'll get the back of the Jeep on its way.